because they couldn't move through Data Shack without contributing to this 118 error. So that's pretty much the only things that you'll see deviating, and you'll see it in the comments in the DDL. So you'll know what's going on. You'll know why there are any columns that are missing and why. So otherwise, that is pretty much, I think, all that's noteworthy about the DDL. Any comments on the DDL or questions?
The primary key, what's that store ID?
This store ID is something that looks like it was added into the Saba data architecture somewhat recently to create more uniqueness, and so I'm guessing it was something that was going to be used for functionality so that you could have multiple stores of different customers and then they could overlap. I don't see that when I was working on this, Teachscape wasn't currently using that. It was always the same value, but it's something that Saba has put in their database and is a good idea to identify and keep in the primary key as it is. It's a little bit redundant because of it's not really being used. So it's always the same store ID. You don't really need it to maintain uniqueness, but at some point that's going to change, and not sure when that's going to happen, and you'll definitely want it to be included for your primary key when you build these container tables.
Okay.
Anything else? Oh, the other comment here is this was done pre-Allen, so you'll notice none of Allen's standards have been built into this, so don't tell him. But this stuff is all well before him, and so you're not going to see the standards. And if you want to take the time to throw standards in there, that's always something to consider to keep things neat and clean. But just take note of that, I guess.
Okay, noted.
And let's see, so that's the DDL. And why don't we look now at the code itself. So this is pretty much one big file, and it's this file that you're looking at, saba.clj, and it is, I'm going to roll up here to the top, it is the main bits. Everything else that was changed was in the configuration files, the definition files that I'm sure you're already familiar with, Henry. So as far as the connections as well as the source definitions are all also in place where everything else is organized. But this is the main closure file that does everything from the container files all the way down through to the analytical files. So all of those syncs are right here in this file. I'll show you.
Where does the Saba database exist?
I'm sorry?
Where does the Saba's database exist?
Where is
Like
it?
where are you pulling the data from? Yes.
Well, so I built this off of Stage, and that's where I was working off of. That is the only place that we had sort of a developmental Saba instance. And take another note that this you also need, in order to connect, you need to first connect a tunnel to the server before you can use an Oracle client, or before Data Shack will be able to connect to it. So you need to tunnel in first. That's something to note. Unless you're connecting, I know we have another Saba instance that lives in the cloud, and in order to get connectivity to that one, you need to have your IP address hard-coded in the firewall somewhere. So, and so that's how you connect to the cloud version. And then we have an instance in production that I believe you also need to tunnel to. That's more similar to Stage. And those are the three locations that I know where it exists. And all 4 schemas exist in all of those places for you to play with.
I see. So as far as QA is concerned, does that mean that you'll have to get a Saba instance onto one of the QA boxes, onto 3 QA boxes?
Well, no. So we have a Saba instance that's connected to QA3 already.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but that's the only QA environment where.
So it actually has an Oracle database and the Saba database within it?
It's somehow connected. I don't know how that works.
Oh, okay.
Somehow Saba is hooked up.
So I can go onto QA3 and do the import from QA3.
I mean, the Saba databases don't actually exist on QA3. They somehow QA3 connects to the databases, but I don't know where they live. Yeah. You probably talk to Steve. Yeah, he's setting that up.
Yeah, Steve is the guy to talk to with Saba. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing to be aware of, Henry, is I'm not sure what is going on our stage Saba instance, but the file system routinely fills up to 100%, and when that happens, it causes connectivity issues. And the last few times that I was working with this code, each time I needed I needed to call Steve and have him help. It seems to happen on an almost daily basis, so just be aware of that as well, because that might hang you up if you're not aware of it. I'm not sure what's going on stage that causes it, but Steven, if you just ping him, he goes in and he does a little magic and clears it up. I think it's a core dump of some sort, dropping a huge file somewhere or something, and it affects your ability to talk to it.
Okay, I'll double check that out, but I'll probably be working, I'm assuming, off of QA3, right? Because that'll be the environment that you guys can verify.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure that it's working on QA3, but I might test.
And it's also controlled by us. We don't really know what's going on with staging.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously we need Stephen's help on QA3, but it's still more configurable on our end than having to bother staging.
Yeah.
So we'll want to do it. But we need to get, like you're saying, we need to get those answers to the question.
Well, I'm curious to know how it works on QA3. I mean, if it's just hooking to staging, let's say, for instance, then it's essentially will have the same problems that staging has. So we need to kind of get all these details first.
That's the next logical step, is to go to him.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sounds good. We'll figure it out on our end.
Okay, sounds good. So let me show you a little bit, just a few of these calls to the closure code from in here, so you have an idea of what's going on. They're all very similar. Again, they're truncate and load, because we weren't able to use Data Shack with an incremental due to how these tables were designed on the source. So we've got each of these start out with the truncate here, and then it goes through and does each of the 4 schemas. So you'll see there's a group of codes for those. So right here, oh wait, so these are the lists, okay, these are the list of values. These are the 2 list of value tables. I'm only pulling this from one schema because they are identical in all 4 schemas. So it would have been redundant, and I don't see there being much risk in these list of values deviating between the 4 schemas. So that's why for these 2 here, there's only one call to one of the schemas. But all of the other ones, you will see they start out with a truncate, and then you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 calls for each of the schemas. So this will go ahead and it indicates the source table and the target table, and then this is the flag that I needed to add so that we could turn this purge deleted rows off. So what was happening is that the way it was originally designed, when you did a sync, what Data Shack would do is it would it would decide whether or not it was on the same server, and it would just go ahead and do a more optimal load. This would not work for the Saba database because of how the key is a composite primary key. And so we needed to be able to turn that off. And so I did need to make one change in the sync data function so that that was a flag, an optional flag for us. So we could do that or not. And that is the thing that makes this QA job interesting, in that not only will the Saba work need to be QA'd, but you will need to do a little bit of regression to make sure all of the existing jobs weren't affected. Now, the change was made in such a way that I did it in the least intrusive way, so that it's not supposed to change the way anything works right now. It's supposed to basically just stay the same. But this flag needed to be part of that function now, thus it needed to be passed in. Or what I did, instead of touching all of the files and had it pass in with all the functions, instead I just had it default in the function if it wasn't passed in. So none of the other code needed to be touched except for the code in the sync data function. And so it will take the value that's coming from the Saba extract, but then for all of the other extracts, it will just default to the value that it would have used anyway. So it's not a major regression, and I did some testing on my end too, and it didn't affect anything, but you're definitely going to want to, as part of QA, just run and eyeball all the other loads to just make sure that they weren't affected by this change, because we tried to keep all of the Data Shack work contained so that we don't touch any of the other code for this reason, but this was a place where it was unavoidable to get the Saba data extract in there. So that's how I handled it, and it's not perhaps the best code design way, but the most risk-averse way when it comes to QAing and working with the Data Shack code.
When I take a look at the sync data function, it looks like it'll be fine, because you're setting first deleted row to false, and it defaults to true. But if
I'm sorry, Henry. I'm sorry, Henry. That is another. Sorry, I'm crossing my streams here. So the purge deleted rows, yes, that always has to be turned off for this data, because it does try to delete rows that aren't there anymore, and that functionality also does not work with the composite primary key from the source. Right. So those are always set. When we get down to the analytical tables, that is where we're moving data from these container tables that are at the beginning of this over into the analytical tables, where we are going to be building the reports from, and that's where this is the flag, optimize. I apologize for the confusion there, Henry, but that's the flag that I mean. That's the flag that I had to turn off, and it was for the tables that we're building from the container tables to the tables we're building the reports off of.
I see. Where is the optimized flag? Is that also part of sync data?
That is in yeah, the sync data function. And I can pull that up and show you where that is. I didn't have a chance to dig that up before we got started here. So All right, so here is where I commented the work and where it was added in. So here,
you added the optimized parameter.
yes, optimize right here. And we're defaulting it to true because that's how it behaved for everything else before the Saba extract was put together. I figured that was the least risky for the existing code. What probably makes sense is to determine if you want to optimize or not because of the limitations of Data Shack, but like I said, I just wanted to touch the minimal amount of code as possible, and that way we didn't have to take a closer look at each of the existing loads because of this.
Where's optimize being used? Can you scroll down in that function?
So I believe it goes, so when you do the copy from query, that passes it. So we move to copy from query. Query. Yeah, so here's where I put some more comments on here. This is where we bring optimize in. And then we go, where do we go from here? Source query.
Oh, I see. This is where, if it exists on the same database, it'll do the copy from one database to another within this SQL, as opposed to reading
and that
it
is, and that's what we don't want to happen.
Function. I see.
Can you repeat that, Henry?
So does it make a mistake when you try to do this? Doesn't it realize that it's actually on a different server and not use the not try to optimize the query?
It does that for the container tables when you're pulling straight from Saba. This is why you didn't see that flag up in that closure code that we were first looking at. But when it comes into play is when we have all of the data, all of the base data loaded into those container tables, then we pull from those tables into the analytical tables. Those sources and targets are on the same server.
Right.
And that's where we want to avoid the optimize function.
I see what you're saying. I see. The analytical tables, is that just like, it's basically just creating views, or it's just creating tables that are based upon the other tables so that it'll be faster for the reports to
so these,
is that correct?
Yeah, so these tables have just what is needed for reporting from those tables. And these were designed by Lewin with Allison, and so we're pretty sure that we got, everything we need in there for the reporting side of things. And so what I did is I got all of the tables that was needed to get all of these items, and I pulled those tables in their entirety over as container tables or staging tables, if you will, so that we can build all of the reports we need to from this model, and then we can add and modify as well if we decide, if Allison decides as we go into user acceptance, if we need to add things or change things, we should have a vast majority of what we need to do that for this context area and this detail level.
I see.
And then that was also the place where we were able to do the combination of all of the 4 schemas so that we wouldn't have to have separate schemas for each of the different schemas and customers that we would have to hit. We can go, Allison and Ajit will be able to go to one place to get reporting for this type of data, no matter which customer that they're working to serve.
Right. Okay, I think I got it.
So, we've got the, are you comfortable with what's going on here, Henry? I apologize, it's been a long time since I've looked at this stuff, and as you know, we have to get your head around.
What I'll probably do after this is just trace it through so that I can see more carefully what exactly is happening. But from what you've described, I don't really see any problems with the way that you've implemented it. So, but I will take a look at it more carefully after the meeting.
Yeah, this is where I dropped it in to fail or not, that if statement that will do the query for local copy is where it happens, where it is very efficient code, but it doesn't work for what we're trying to do. So we wanted that to drop out of there and go into this part.
When you didn't have the optimized flag, what would happen? Would it just fail?
It would. The optimized flag wasn't in here, so all it did was check to see if the source and the target were on the same database, and
right.
if it had what it needed for mapping it, and then it just went ahead and optimized. And then all I did was add a third condition in here that must be true, and it's that we are allowing it to optimize. And that value defaults to true if it is not specified, as it isn't anywhere in our pre-existing code. So in that way, it behaves exactly as it did before I added this. This was just a lever for me to pull with the Saba code so that we could force it to skip this step when we were loading the analytical tables.
Okay.
Don't know if that helps anymore, but yeah, so that I think is, let's see, oh, there's one, if you might want to consider adding one more table to this, and in ongoing discussions with WGU, I don't know if you're familiar with them, Henry, but they're sort of in and out. They're looking for some data, but I don't know, Allison, if you've heard from them recently. I certainly haven't. I know they've got a project that they're trying to complete, and we've agreed to give them some data, and we've had a little back and forth. I've given them a sample, and there was, in our conversations after I had completed this, there was one other table that came up that would be interesting to them, that if you're going to be putting some time into this and putting it through a QA effort, to add one more table is a pretty small incremental change. If you just, if you just put it in exactly as it is today, then you can satisfy WGU's requirements as they are today anyway. So there's one more table, and that table is the content inventory table. So let me show you, let's see what it's called. I've got it. It's this table here, CNT.
On your question there, I have had no conversations with WGU, and actually what's accelerated our move on this has to do with the state of Wisconsin that's upset with us because they...
Right. Yeah, so I'm aware of that, and I know you may not want to put any additional effort into this for WGU, right. But right. If, Henry will know how quickly it would be to add an additional table. Okay. But this is the name of the table if you're interested in going that route. There's one other thing. Something that came up in the QA demo as a test scenario that I did not get a chance to check on was what would happen if you run this Data Shack code and one of the schemas is unavailable. That is, in looking at the code, I think what's going to happen is it's just going to load no data. But it would be worth testing, I think, just to see what might happen if one schema is unavailable. That was just something that came up in the demo that I thought I'd pass on to you. And the other thing, Henry, is I did not get the full change into the README doc. I don't know how you want to handle that, if we're still putting that type of effort into keeping the doc that helps people build. This is obviously a brand new source, so if you're trying to get a developer up and running with DataShack and all of its source, there was a nice document that Ilko put together that highlighted all the sources and where you get the data and how you make the connection. And that stuff is not yet in the README file, so you might want to consider how you want to, if you want to document it or not, and if you want me to finish that up, I'm happy to as well. So that's just up to you guys. But that is sort of where it stands. I think that those are all the loose ends and all of the things that I wanted to call to your attention. So go ahead and shoot with any questions.
The code that you changed and the new Saba CLJ file, is that checked in to a branch?
Yeah. Yep, it's the DataShack 185.
DataShack 185, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm okay. I mean, I probably will have more questions after I've had time to kind of look through this more closely, but it doesn't seem that bad.
Okay. I do have, there are a couple of branches sitting out there that are related to this. For instance, Ilko, he made a change to the connector that you use to connect to Oracle in a branch, in a separate branch. And what I did is I just integrated his work into my branch. And so you might want to sort of take a look at what's out there and just take inventory. But there's some branches out there that should just be deleted, and I need to get in there and clean that up, but wasn't really wanting to do that until we had all of our development branch and our master branch all sort of organized out. So that's another note about this work, is there are some branches sitting around, some additional branches that we can clean up and get rid of with the completion of this work.
Okay, so, but 185 is the one that I should be looking
yep,
at.
185 is the one that has everything you need in it.
Okay. Okay. I think I'm okay then. I mean, I'm sure I'll have more questions once I start looking at this stuff. So
yeah.
I'll probably have to be pinging for that. But
yeah, for sure.
Right. I don't really have any more questions.
Julia, do you have anything?
Really, sort of the only thing I can think of right now is I'm just curious, like how big these databases are that we're pulling from, or how long this, how long the ETL takes, and because we're starting to hit some kind of performance issues on the QA environments anyway, with the other syncs.
Yeah. So I don't. Let me pull up. I have some stats on that somewhere. I know I do. It's been a while, but I'll pull up those numbers. I want to say that everything loads in around 10-15 minutes, but let me pull up my notes and get you a better number than that, because I know I recorded that. That was obviously one of my big concerns with truncate and reload. But I remember being pretty impressed with how quickly DataShack does its thing. I mean, it's not doing a lot of logging and additional stuff that a lot of ETLs would be doing. So it does move quite fast. And I wasn't concerned about that, about the latency there, but I'm going to get you the numbers so you can take a look at them yourself and see what you think.
Okay.
James, did you have any questions?
No, not really. Obviously, I haven't really worked on Data Shack or any of this stuff before, so I'm just coming into this with a fresh pair of eyes because Priya's been moved out of this kind of Saba Data Shack stuff, and she's on the next generation platform. So I'm just going to kind of examine it along with the rest of everyone else.
Okay, sounds good. Let me know if you have any questions. Allison, what do you think?
Well, if Henry sounds like he's not discouraged, that's usually a pretty good sign. So, so I think we've got that. And what I guess it sounds like what we'll do is Henry will look at this. He'll loop back with you and have some questions, and then the hard part about this is that normally I can write acceptance criteria for these types of things, but I'm almost going to rely on Henry to help me write those because I'm not sure that I can take through all this code and figure out how to do that. So that would be the next step of this. Because when we did this before, it was like, here's the tables, right? Go make it, right? So that's probably going to be the bigger challenge. So from a timing perspective, you're around if Henry has questions over the next few weeks or so, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then QA-wise, I think it sounds like, Henry, once you've got some sort of handle on this, maybe you and I can sit down and figure out how we could write some sort of acceptance criteria for this so that, QA could actually get a grasp of what it would take to get done.
I'm not sure how we verify the data that's being pulled in there. That's the only thing. Like, is there a...
Yeah, how do we
know it's the correct data?
Do we have a pre and post validation?
I'm not even, so the thing is, the only thing we know is that there is, so it's almost like one of these weird things like we're doing with Focus right now. There is this, the Learn reports, the reason we're going through this process is for almost the same reason as we went through this process for Focus, which is that Learn is a pain in the butt and only lets you report one organization at a time. So what customers want to do is they want to see all the training time that's been done in all the courses for their district, right? And they can't do that. They have to click each individual run and run it separately. The main things that we're trying to report on are existing reports in Learn to a large extent. In other words, that they're sort of, there's a training time report which you can run, which should match what we see for training times here. There isn't really a course count, so I'm not even sure how we could completely validate this either. I mean, the good part of it is it's a lot less risky data than scores, right? We're just running reports to do that. But I think we'd almost have to do it by looking at reports out of Learn and seeing how we compare them to reports out of this. So I'm not sure how we do that exactly, but that's probably what we're going to have to do. And some of this stuff, which is where I get a little wary once we stretch past, I'm pretty sure that I know how to find the reports that are for the specific tables that we said we needed to have for the reports that we said were, by the way, there's so much more data in these tables than we actually said we had to have for the minimal requirements that we put out there. But given the effort to do it at all, it was like, well, let's just make sure that we can meet, all of the requirements customers could eventually ask for. So I think maybe what we can do is focus in on the specific reports, which are fairly limited, and see if we can use Learn itself to validate. Does that make sense at all?
Okay. I mean, if we have reports we can use as, being correct, then that'll help us at least get a
I hope so. I have to go through and look at these things. I know the biggest problem is there's a report out there called Training Times, and it's a pain in the butt because if you have 10 schools, you have to run it separately for each of the 10 schools. So we should be able to, come up with some methods of using those. And now that we have this, I'll start looking and seeing how I would actually get the data that I said I needed for the, essentially the Tableau type reports, see if I can get that out of those reports. And if I can do that, we can use these those for validation. It's not as risky a validation process because if we don't count the number of courses, it's not as bad, but some people do use this time on professional development to as part of people's teacher certifications, and some of them actually get reimbursed for time spent, so we have to be at least somewhat clear on what we're doing. All right, that sounds good. What I did do is I did record this just in case it would be helpful, but I started late, so I started with Nikki said, something or other, and I was like, oh, I should do this. So I'll record this and put it someplace just in case anyone wants to call on it for records, and then I'm counting on you and you, Henry, to get back with Nikki and figure out what you don't understand, and then I'll try to see if I can help out on how we could possibly validate this using Learn Report.
Right.
Allison, when is the deliverable date for this?
So the deliverable date for this is we have a commitment to deliver the data in Learn Report to Wisconsin in October. But the data that we're talking about is a much smaller subset of what's actually in here. They have this problem where they would like to be able to find out the training times and the course usage, which is not a huge, it's a fairly small subset of the data that we have here. But we do have a commitment to Wisconsin to allow them to do that. So it's possible, and I have not had a conversation on how we're going to implement it. It is possible that we don't actually fully QA this for every single client, and that we say, okay, we're going to do it for Wisconsin, and we'll publish this on some separate Tableau, location, and we just only deal with Wisconsin for now. If we get pushed to the wall, that may be what we have to do, which is going to make WGU happy, but which will meet our, commitment to Wisconsin, because I don't think we have a date commitment for WGU. I don't know if that helps at all. I mean, we may end up limiting our scope on our first pass of this.
Okay.
And so October, I mean, does that mean like early October or late October or sometime in October, or like?
It just says sometime in October. I wasn't on the call. What happened was the way that, the fact that you can only run, so here's the problem with reports and Learn. Number one, they don't run in Chrome. You have to run them in compatibility mode with Internet Explorer. So first of all, the environmental issues, they blow up, they don't work very well. You can run them in Safari, and you can run them in Firefox. So that's the first annoyance, seeing as a large number of our customers actually use Internet Explorer, as we know, right? And not in compatibility mode. The second problem is that they wanted to be able to run reports at the top level, which means they couldn't do that. And they wanted to run them at the state level or at the district level. They can't do that, so that was just driving them nuts. And then it became sort of a, they started treating like everything we did as a security problem because, they didn't have the right roles, or they'd have to give people different roles. And so I think it's more of a, we told them we'd get them focus reports, right? And we told them we'd get them Learn reports at the, state and district level, and we get them something by October. I think if we give a proof of concept, or we can run them for them even, we can get past this. So that's why I said the main criteria for me is to just have the data be available in October. Does that make sense?
Is this going to be a report that we run and we deliver to them, or is this a report that's going to have to go through like Tableau or Whippet?
So what I was saying is that here's the scenario that I was playing out that would require the lowest amount of effort would be we create something that's just a query and we deliver to them. I don't think they'll be too thrilled with that one, because then they'd have to ask us all the time. The next level up would be to just QA it for Wisconsin, and then actually create. For Wisconsin, way back in the sales process, we actually gave them their own Tableau site that we've never actually implemented. It's actually just published it to that one site. They're the only people who can get it. They're the only people who can see it, and only certain people can run it or something, right? So that's another possibility. The third possibility is we actually put these in Learn, right? In which case they could run them there. But that involves us putting the links in Learn, right? Because we haven't ever implemented anything with Tableau or with Learn yet, right?
Right.
So the limit, that's why Chris is sort of pushing back. It's like, I don't want to do anything in Learn that I don't have to do, because that takes Learn resources, and he only has one guy, right? So I'm trying to find a way of getting Wisconsin's data and information without actually having to involve Learn. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. So But it's basically, that's what I said, the only thing we're not going to do right now is just figure out how we can get the data there and the level of QA to get the data there. And we'll just, limit it to looking at reports for Wisconsin, and then we could say, okay, we can do that. This is about how much effort it is to do for Wisconsin, and then somebody's going to come back and say how much everybody else. But that's pretty much what I've been told is to look at Wisconsin, because they're the only dates we have. Does that help at all?
I mean, somewhat. It's all sounds kind of up in the air, but. So
yeah, we're just going to take this one step at a time, and at some point I am going to ask you to say how big this red box is, because we are going to have to figure out what that is. But
yeah.
But I don't think it's possible for you guys to come out with an estimate out of this until we've taken a little bit farther down the road.
Yeah,
I think so.
I would agree with that.
But I think that the thing that kind of worries me is the whole environment thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for this stuff, it's actually not too bad as far as the data shack's point of view, because all it is I'm importing a bunch of tables and I'm doing it from another data source. So from a data shack perspective, it's not that bad. But the problem is that I won't have Oracle on my machine, and so how am I going to test this? How am I going to be able to do imports? Do I have to use a QA box? There's just a lot of stuff that I think we need to go with into TechOps and kind of sit down with them to figure out, because I think that may be our biggest problem.
Agreed.
Yeah, Henry, I don't know what has changed or how they want to go forward with this, but when I was developing, what I did is I used Oracle's SQL Developer. It's a little application package, and that was the client that I used to connect. So first I would tunnel in, and then I would connect with that client, and then I could run ad hoc queries to see what the tables contained. And I could also connect with Data Shack and grab the data and pull it into my Data Shack instance on my machine, and then I would compare the results of queries between the source and the target there. And that's sort of the workflow that I used and the setup that I used.
Right, right.
Because you don't have to mess with putting Oracle on your machine.
Right. It's just that if I use a similar setup, what modifications will I need for this? Because it won't run the same way on production or on QA. And I want to make sure that I'm running it as closely as possible to QA and production in order so that I don't create more problems than I solve. And so it is one of those things I think we'll have to sit down with TechOps. I'm sure there's a way of doing it similar to the way you're doing it now, but it's just that it's not going to be anywhere near what's running in production that worries me.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how they plan on connecting Data Shack to production Saba, because that machine also would need it's going to need a tunnel. You can see in the file that has all the connections in it. I forget the name of that file. Maybe you probably are more fresh with that, Henry. You know where all the connections are.
Config.edu. Yeah, it should be on the top level.
Oh yeah, it's up further yet, isn't it?
It's one more level up.
I think it's a couple. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So this is what it looks like, and then here we've got the 4 Saba source schemas, and we got the comment in here about setting up the tunnel. But this is what it looks like. And I have a feeling, Henry, you'll want to check with TechOps, so like you're planning to do, but I have a feeling that however you set it up on your local development machine is going to be the same way that they're going to set it up between the server and the Saba instance. But good idea in talking to Stephen about it, making sure and seeing what his plans are.
Okay, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it sounds like, and if I can help out at all, Henry, with the whole tech ops thing, I'll be happy to do that because I'm going to be hanging with them trying to talk about migration next week anyway, so we'll see where it goes.
I think for me, I'm going to try to see if I can get a successful run of this so that I can, from start to finish, load it onto my own machine from Saba, and that should answer a lot of my questions. And if I can do that, then we should be in pretty good shape.
Definitely don't
So
hesitate
I'll
to
probably
ping me, Henry, as you do that.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll have lots of questions. Also, when I look through the code, I may have some questions as far as how you're doing things as well. But I'll ping you.
Good.
I have your
All right, so you guys are all set. We're 4 minutes into all this, so unless you want to go longer on this, I think we've got to-dos, which is make sure we get with tech ops, make sure we understand environments. Henry's going to try to work through this and talk to Nikki about it, and then once you feel comfortable enough, I will also work on trying to get the reports that we could possibly use for QA, and then maybe we'll do a regroup, just making sure we're all on the same page and try to estimate the level of effort involved. Sound like a plan?
Sure.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I'll get Julia some numbers on performance and put some more documentation up on the ticket.
Okay. Well, thanks for everyone's time, and hopefully we can pull this off because let's see, we started this in October last year, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So maybe we can make it in a 1-year process. We can actually accomplish the thing we started last October. All right. Good evening, everybody. Actually, it's afternoon for you, but it's 6 for me, so I'm signing off. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.